I don't think anyone that is living today has spent any time in the field with Bob Titmus. So let's go back to October 1987. I made a decision to go up to the Bluff Creek area and just scout around. And lo and behold, who came down from Canada? Back then there was, I mean, if you're making a phone call, it's long distance, but I had no knowledge that Bob Titmus was going to be in the area. He was in Bluff Creek at the same time I was in Bluff Creek. And so as I drove in that valley, the area, there was absolutely nobody there. Absolutely nobody except this old man. And I had seen his pictures in John Green's book. And so I pulled up to him and stopped. And I rolled down my power window on my Volkswagen Jetta. And I said, "You wouldn't happen to be Bob Titmus, would you?" And he goes, "I am." And the next thing I said, because I'm pretty straightforward, I said, "You sure have aged since those photos in John Green's book." And he just laughed. He just laughed. But I spent about 3 days with him in the field. And that was, I mean, there's really no one on the face of the planet right now who could say that anymore. And I did. And that was in Bluff Creek. And it was just like, that was just a spontaneous type of thing. I didn't know he was going to be there. He happened to be there. So that was great. And I was privileged to hear many of the stories and that he had accumulated up to that time.
And that's what to me is so impressive is there was such a brain trust of researchers and investigators that weren't armchair quarter. They were in there getting their feet dirty, because they had to. That's the only way they were going to get out there and find and get more information. Like you said, not that they not always get along, but there was such a wealth of knowledge between, all these characters you're talking about. You got one more story for us there, Dan?
Well, I think that's, I have a story with Tom Steenberg, but I didn't mention him earlier.
Tom's going to be on the show in a month or so that'd be great to hear about Tom.
This happened when I was up in Canada again. So I went to the Sasquatch Symposium, and as I recall, I gave a talk. And so I stood over, and so I told Tom, I said, "Why don't we do some camping out in an area where people have had a sighting?" And so we did. And so we started going into these small caves that had trees and branches covering the front. So on the way out of one of the caves, it was just myself and Tom Steenberg, and he's behind me. And so what I did is he smokes a pipe, by the way. Just envision he's smoking a pipe. And he happened to have, at the time, a pipe in his mouth. And I know very little about smoking pipes, but the pipe he had was like a two-piece smoking pipe. Like you could take it apart and clean it, I guess. And so as I was coming out of the cave, I pushed a big branch out of my way. And for whatever reason, I was just completely oblivious that Tom Steenberg was right behind me. And so I let it loose and it fired back at him. And as it was going, I just said, "Oh my goodness, Tom Steenberg is directly behind me." So I turned behind myself. I looked behind me, and instead of having the pipe in his mouth, he has just the front piece of it stuck in his mouth. And we had a great laugh over that.
Good stuff, Dan. Good stuff. Beating up on Tom out in the field. We're talking about. Oh, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
And during that trip, we saw a bear. It wasn't a grizzly bear, but it was a big bear cross the road. I think it went from right to left on a dirt trail road. And so Tom and Steenberg and I are maybe 50 feet away or something like that. We both had our cameras. But by the time it got to the other side and back into the tree line, we were just barely getting our cameras out, and we missed it. So I told Tom, and Tom told me, he said, had that been a Bigfoot, we would have missed it completely.